My name is Lori Friedley. I'm head of the adult department at Mamaroneck Public Library. Welcome everybody to our wonderful program. Everybody that's here knows that we are doing a 1968 One Book, One Community program. We are into our second week and have some wonderful, wonderful programs forthcoming. We have brochures upstairs, a few of them left, about the One Book, One Community, and we have brochures about our forthcoming programs on the table. It is my honor today to introduce the 12th Man group. We have with us, stand up when I call your name, or wave at least, Sal Ticli, USMC. He heads off the 12 Man group. Dennis Cucinella, US Navy. Norman Rosenblum, who everybody knows, but I'm introducing him anyway. Veteran activist and Mamaroneck's mayor of the past. John, don't I don't like to say that. Of the past. Okay. John Amoruso, USMC, and Skip Donahue, USN. I don't have much of a voice to speak. There is one thing that I would like to say. It is an honor to have our veterans with us. We live in a free country, which is, we've got rights and we've got everything anybody would like to have, and many people that don't live here would like to have. We are guaranteed the blessings we have because of those who serve. That's it. That's it.
By the way, the IRS is outside, they'll take cash.
Very funny. Okay. And I'll hang around for a teeny bit. So, okay.
Just so you know, I've never done a PowerPoint before. All right, so if we somehow get all jumbled up here, we try.
It's Dennis's fault, don't worry about it.
Nor have I.
You're modest, Sal. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Good afternoon. My name is Sal Ticli. I'm a 71-year resident of Mamaroneck, 1964 graduate of Mamaroneck High School, and a Vietnam veteran. I would like to thank John Pritz, Lori Friedley, and the Mamaroneck Historical Society for their devotion and respect for the Vietnam veteran. I'd also like to thank Gloria Pritz for her many years of devotion to the Historical Society. I've known her most of my life, and I would never call her Gloria except this one instance. So thank you, Mrs. Pritz. I'd like to acknowledge LMC-TV and Xavier over there for their continuing brilliance in capturing the meaning of such events as this one today. I would also like to thank everyone in attendance for your interest in this event and the Vietnam era. Do we have veterans in this room? If you're a veteran, just do me a favor, stand up for a second. Because this is about veterans. I especially want to thank you I especially want to thank you for your service, for your sacrifice and devotion to the United States of America and the very freedoms you have provided us with today. Thank you. I will be speaking on 4 topics today. It's a little lengthy and I'm sorry for it, but there's no way I can handle it. The first will be an introduction back to 1968. If I'm going to talk about 1968, I want to get you back into 1968. So there's 3 ways I decided to do that. The second is the Vietnam and the 50th anniversary of the Tet Offensive. The third will be the 12th Man tradition. This is what you see here, and which is observed every year when the Mamaroneck High School football players wear a bracelet with the names, rank, branch of service, and the date of death of the 12 Vietnam veterans that gave all from the Mamaroneck Larchmont communities. and 4 would be the Greatest Generation Foundation, and we're going to go back to a little trip back to Vietnam. I thought they were going to be sitting behind me, but obviously they're over here. But I have two Vietnam veterans, one submariner, Skip is a submariner, and a retired mayor, an ex-mayor, who has supported all veterans in with continuous grace and dignity. They will introduce themselves and speak briefly on a topic they have picked for this event. The leading off will be Skip Donahue, United States Navy.
Thank you. First again, I'll introduce myself. My name is Skip Donahue, and I served in the United States Navy from 1964 to 1968. I was on active duty for 4 years and 2 years of reserve duty. I was a RM3 SS while in the service. I graduated from Mamaroneck High School in 1964, and I enlisted in the Navy and left for boot camp in October of the same year. After completing boot camp, the Navy shipped me out to San Diego, California to Radio A School, where I learned Morse code and all that's involved in being a radioman, and as much as they could pack into a 6-month class. While there, I saw posters looking for volunteers for submarine duty. I said, well, it looks kind of exciting, maybe I'll volunteer. So I volunteered for sub duty. I went through some mental and physical testing, and I was chosen for the program and was destined to go back to Groton on the East Coast to submarine school. Before I got there, the Navy had other plans. They sent me down to Norfolk, Virginia, where I spent another 4 or 5 months working in a communication station called ComSubAtlant, which means Commander Submarine Atlantic Fleet. After there, I finally got back to Groton, Connecticut, went to sub school. After graduating sub school, I was assigned to the USS Tusk SS-426. And I thought to myself, how ironic. I studied nuclear-powered submarines, and I'm going to a diesel-electric submarine. But it was the best experience of my life. I spent the next 12 to 18 months on board the Tusk going through what they call a qualification period. Qualification period was I had to learn every system on the boat, and I had to be tested by each lead petty officer in every division. After that, I went before a review board, which consisted of the captain and the engineering officer, for an oral exam and a walkthrough. When they were satisfied that they knew everything, I was presented with the Covenant Submarine Dolphin insignia, which I wear proudly to this day. During my 4 years, we made 1 med deployment to the Mediterranean. We did 2 50 to 60 snorkeling runs up north, which they rewarded us with some nice port calls to Germany, Sweden, France, Denmark, England, Scotland. We did 2 Mediterranean runs down south. We also did some patrols along the East Coast. But my basic job, or the basic job of submarines back then, was the Cold War. We were tracking Russian boats, Russian submarines. Anything that had to do with Russia is what we were involved in. Basically espionage and spying back in the early days. Unlike my fellow veterans here, I feel I'm a little bit different. Sal was involved in daily combat day to day, while I was involved in the Cold War. There's a great, well, first off, I wanted to say one thing. If you ever get a chance, there's a great book out there you can read about espionage and submarines. It's called Operation Ivy Bells. It details the operation of a submarine called the Halibut. Fascinating read, if you really want to know. But anyway, I encourage you all to read it. So just jumping ahead a few years, I met Sal. He was in a process establishing this 12th man tradition, and he was trying to get Mamaroneck High School to install the trophy case, which would eventually honor the memory of our 12 veterans from the Mamaroneck Largemont area who gave all. Sal asked if I would like to take part in a Vietnam panel consisting of veterans who served in country. This was going to take place at Mamaroneck High School, where 11th grade students were reading a book dealing with the Vietnam War and the aftermath. We were on a panel, and the students would ask us questions to get a better sense of what everyone went through. I felt a little out of place. I had never served in country, but Sal thought that I would bring a different experience to the forum. It turned out to be a great experience as we did this for 3 years. Sal was very instrumental in getting me to put together a spot in one of the display cases at Mamaroneck, honoring the 2 of the 12 who had graduated from Mamaroneck, namely Richard Burchell and Robert D. Roberto. Sal has not only fought in the jungles and rice paddies in Vietnam, but he has, I lost my spot. But he is, as they say, once a Marine, always a Marine, and Sal is proof of that. He has got the job done. Sal has put his heart and soul into this project, and for me, my affiliation with the 12th Man Tradition has been an honor and is still a privilege, one which I will treasure to the end of time. I am proud to be a part of it. Remember that when these veterans returned home from Vietnam, they were not received with open arms. Instead, they were called names and spit on. Sal has turned that around here in Mamaroneck with hard work and dedication in establishing the 12th Man Tradition. With Sal, the battle has never stopped. So Sal, my hat is off to you for a job well done in preserving the memory of the 12 who gave all.
Hi, my name is Dennis Cucinella. I was in the Navy as well. I served on a destroyer that I picked up in Brooklyn, New York, 1964.
Thanks, this isn't working.
Well, I can't help you.
Don't worry, where is it?
I enlisted in the Navy actually on my 17th birthday, driving down the Boston Post Road in New Rochelle, passed by the armory, and said, let's join with a friend of mine. He didn't go. 4 months later, JFK was killed, and I swore, for not knowing much, that we were going to go to war.
I'm trying to get to here.
Not knowing what was happening in the rest of the world, because just a young kid, 17 years
Click on
old.
that, just.
I went on active duty in November of 1964. Like I said, I picked up the ship in Brooklyn. We went through shakedown cruises, and then we went down to Gitmo for refresher training. And I can almost guarantee you that any detainee they had in Gitmo in the past 10 or 20 years had it better than I did going through that refresher training. It was extremely tedious, difficult, trying. We were all young men, full of whatever we were full of, and we just kept going. It was good. Excuse me. In 1965, I went down to the Dominican Republic when they had the revolution. We were aiding Marines as we were off the coast, doing a little bit of shelling, nothing major. Mostly helping out the Marines to get from one spot to the other, which seemed like a good job at the time. Did some traveling around. We were down in the Caribbean. We went to Jamaica. We went to the Virgin Islands. We went to Florida. We went to Virginia. Came up and down the East Coast a couple of times. And then I went to Vietnam in 1966. We left out of Newport January 1966. Interesting trips going through the Panama Canal. We stopped in San Diego for 4 hours to load air conditioners on the ships and took off again. Our first stop was in Pearl Harbor. And pulling into Pearl Harbor for us was a unique experience, seeing the Arizona Memorial and the other things that were just in and around that harbor area were really incredible. When we left the Pearl Harbor, to go to the Philippines, which was going to be our first station before we went to battle stations, we hit a couple of typhoons. And on a small destroyer, they're called tin cans for a reason, it's quite an experience. You bounce around, but I got my sea legs, so didn't hit the barf bucket too many times. The trip turned into an around-the-world cruise. But our time in Vietnam was, again, escorting Marines up and down the coast. We did some shelling of VC installations. We had pretty good coverage as well. We were the first ship to go north of the DMZ in 1966, and we were sent there specifically to draw fire from the North Vietnamese coastal batteries. We were successful. That'll scare you though when you're sitting out in the water and taking on some shelling. But we did a good job. We got the spotters, found out where they were, and were able to hit them. So we were very proud of that. While there, we went to Japan and Hong Kong, Kaohsiung. We were all over the Orient, and that was just a phenomenal experience going to all these other countries and seeing how they all lived and how they interacted with sailors and soldiers and so on. So it was very interesting. We went to Aden, Saudi Arabia on the way back, and we hit the station where the USS Cole was bombed in 2000. And then came up through the Red Sea, Port Said, Egypt. Transiting the Suez Canal took 2 days. And we went from the Port Said, Egypt to Athens, Greece. From Athens, Greece, we were supposed to go to France, but because we were in a destroyer squadron, they didn't want us there. So we went to Barcelona, Spain, which was a heck of a lot better. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And then we came back across the Atlantic after Barcelona. We were basically called Blue Water Navy because we were not doing what swift boats did and patrol boats, but we did hit the Mekong Delta, which gave us the brown water title. And it's very interesting. Again, as Skip said earlier, we have to thank Sal Ticli because he's actually kept the 12 men alive. And we're here honoring them for what they have, the sacrifices they have made in their families. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is John Amoruso. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sal, for inviting me. I was a corpsman in the service. Technically, we're in the Navy, but I never spent any time with the Navy. I was assigned to the Marine Corps. And what we do, they sent us to, just to tell you what most people don't know what a corpsman does. We're sent to a school. We go 4 months to learn how to keep guys alive. We learn how to do IVs. We can do tracheotomies. We stop bleeding, dispense morphine, which when we came back to this country, we couldn't do any of that stuff. We were considered useless. But over there, we saved lives. And just 95% of the Marines who got wounded didn't die. Okay, we got them. And it was not just us. It was basically the medevac choppers. We stopped the bleeding. We got them started with IVs and got them out of there as fast as we could. And these helicopter pilots come in while they're being shot at, while there's mortar rounds coming. I mean, I remember getting guys out with a basket. You know, they drop the basket down. We put the guy in it, and they lift him up and get him to either a ship, which was the Repose, right?
Repose.
The Repose was the hospital ship, or they get him to a rear BAS where they have surgeons, and there's no way a doctor's going out in the field. They're too educated. They can't. It's a waste of talent, you know. So what happens? You're walking along. You're in the middle of the jungle. Firefight happens. Everybody hits the ground. Whatever. They call corpsmen up. They call us doc. Okay. So our job then is to get up to the front while everything's going on, and Dave Porterfield, who's one of the 12, was a corpsman. Buzz Baviella, who grew up in Mamaroneck, went to Mamaroneck High School, also a corpsman. Myself, I grew up in Mamaroneck. I went to Salesian High School, but I grew up in Mamaroneck. Funny how we all turn out to be corpsmen, which is, was not, you just don't get, you don't decide to do that, but I wanted to be on land. So I got the choice of being that, so I enjoyed it. But after we went to corpsman school for 4 months where we trained with doctors and nurses, then we went to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina and were given combat training where we learned how to fire M16s. Unlike what you see a lot of corpsmen, I carried a rifle and a .45. Before anybody else got shot, we were shooting just like everybody else. And the Marines trained us, and they actually took care of us. I never had to go out and get a guy without 2 Marines on my side. They would come out and we'd try to help me pull the guy back or whatever we had to do. And if you think it's hard to start an IV in the light, try doing it in the dark. It's like, you're feeling guys' veins, you're touching, feeling their back, looking for holes so you can patch them up because you can bleed out pretty quick. And The AK-47s that they use, they make a small hole coming in, and they tumble as they go through your body. And the hole on the rear is way bigger. I mean, you can put the bullet going in here, you can put your whole hand in the wound that comes out, the exit wound. So, you know, it was scary, but the Marines always, I thank God to this day that I was with the Marine Corps, because those guys are just the greatest. Guys like Sal, I mean, they never leave you alone. We never left a guy out there, ever. There was nobody that, if they were out there, they would lose 3 other guys, get hurt, but you'd get that guy back. We never left anybody. Most of the POWs were actually pilots or guys with helicopters who were just shot down. They were by themselves out there, and they're the ones that got captured. Maybe some Army guys, but not many Marines. So we would go out and stay out for 28 days. Then we'd go to the rear for 2 days and take a shower and have some hot food. We drank, you know, I went over there, I weighed 190 pounds. I came back, I was 145. 'Cause I really, being of Italian descent, I really could eat the spaghetti and meatballs that came in that can. All the other stuff, so basically, and there were times when you couldn't, when you get socked in, so I'll tell you, you get socked in, which is like total rain in monsoon season, where there's no resupply, so you're just out there. There's fog, they can't fly helicopters, you can't get, so you're just out there, and you in your pack, I carried 2 medical bags strapped over, an M16, a 45. Everybody had to carry a mortar round, because the mortar guy, when you got into the combat, they'd say, pass up the mortar rounds. Everybody gives their mortar round up, and then they give you another one. And 9 canteens I had. The guys got heat stroke and stuff like that. You had to have water. And the water you took out of the rivers, lakes, whatever. And you put these tablets in, and it tasted awful, but you drank that. It was ugly, but you drank it. It was cold. And so, you know, you make do. You didn't sleep in tents. We didn't have cots. We slept. At the end of the day, we'd go out looking for trouble. That's why I say it. We were in the jungle looking for a fight. We'd go out there. If we didn't see the enemy that day or 2 days, we'd go to the highest point. They put you on a hill. You camp for the night. The next morning, you get up and do the same thing. You sleep in the dirt, the mud, whatever's there. There's no. I remember I kept my helmet and my flak jacket. A lot of guys threw it away because it gets hot. But the flak jacket protected you from getting shrapnel, which I always thought was worth wearing. So anyway, and then when you go to the rear, you get your mail, you get your packages. You're there for 2 days. You sleep in a tent. They give you beer, a hot meal, whatever, and then you go right back out again. And that's what you did. That was it, you know. And I never regretted doing it. When we got back, I remember coming. When we came home. I got to San Francisco, and they said we couldn't wear our uniforms to go on Liberty. I mean, it's a disgrace. You can't wear your uniform. I remember at the time my grandfather had died. He was laid out in Camp Rose in New Rochelle. My mother kept him for 5 days so I could get there. So I went from the airport to the funeral parlor, and my mother wanted me in my uniform. I wore my uniform. And it's a disgrace. I mean, today when I'm in an airport, I see anybody in a uniform, I walk up and thank them. We didn't get that. You know, we got a bunch of long-haired hippies throwing crap, calling us baby killers. Now, we were in the rear for a while. We went to orphanages and took care of the Vietnamese kids. I never killed a kid, and nobody I ever saw ever killed a baby. Or the kids are kids, you know. I got a picture up there of a kid. They used to come and do on mine sweeps for.
Sorry, I didn't get that one.
That's okay. We were on mine sweeps for 2 weeks, and this kid would bring me a can of Coke. Where he got it, I have no idea. An actual can of Coca-Cola. He was 7 years old. I used to give him my C-rats. So one day he says, "Can I have a cigarette?" I said, I called him Cool Hand Luke. I said, "Luke, what are you doing smoking? You're 7 years old." He said, "Well, how long do you think I'm going to live?" He says. That's what he said to me. It's a 7-year-old kid. He was an orphan. He had no shoes. So I actually took the lieutenant had a soft cover, which the kid wanted. So I actually stole it from the lieutenant, gave it to the kid. And years later, when the lieutenant saw the picture, he said, "There's my cover." But they're kids, you know, and we used to go there, and the biggest thing for those kids, they wanted Band-Aids, you know? They show you the cuts or something on your hand, they want a Band-Aid. But they had no shoes, they were all skinny like a stick, you know? And so my thing when I went to Vietnam is I felt I did some good. Whether, you know, we had reunions a couple of times. I met guys who I had patched up and who I hadn't seen in years, and they remembered, you know. And the kids we took care of, we were kids. Whether you agree or disagree with the war, that's meaningless. What we did what our country asked us to do. The same way our fathers did and our grandfathers did. And I don't regret doing that, and I'll never apologize for doing it. I think we did the right thing, and I think I'm a better person for it. But I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sal. Well, if anybody wants to read, Buzz actually wrote a book.
Just a note, John and I went to Holy Trinity together.
Yeah.
And Dennis and I went to high school together.
And you're gonna be seeing Buzz a little bit later in this presentation. So that kind of worked out well. I wasn't gonna say anything here, but there's a couple of things I wanted to, as I was doing this, I thought were important points. The first one, it's tough to follow a corpsman. These people are the most respected people in this service, right? Or nobody. I want to speak about Agent Orange for a minute and the lifetime battle veterans have with this disgraceful negligence for the United States soldier. I'm speaking my piece, hoping the higher-ups get a message. Veterans who suffer from one form or of 14 different types of cancers are linked to this herbicide that was sprayed on its victims in Vietnam from 1962 to 1975, to Korea from 1968 to 1971, bases at Thailand. And if you served in the Navy in Vietnam, which Dennis did, but I told him this yesterday, and you're in the Navy on a ship or on a boat on the inner highways of Vietnam, it just simply may appear on your health sheet as a cancer. But rest assured, Agent Orange would most likely be the reason you have cancer to begin with. This is devastating. Agent Orange is absolutely devastating. I can't tell you how many people I've bumped into in VA hospitals that suffer from this herbicide attack. Women veterans are also affected by in their reproductive systems, and 50% of them suffer from mental illness. Yet 24% of women are affected by the denial of being sprayed because they're afraid it will affect them getting a good job in the real world. It is disturbing to me that so many brave Vietnam veterans and their families live with the suffering symptoms of Agent Orange. This is an overdose of pain and agony being pushed out the door and neglected by people who represent their states. The John J. Peters Bronx VA is the most outstanding health facility in the United States. I'm living proof of that excellence. No matter what the problem may have been, they simply are the reason I am alive and speaking to you about what should and shouldn't be mentioned in a brief moment. The next topic, and this is a big one because you never hear about this, all right? Never ever hear about this. The only thing that you've heard is recently in the Obama administration, you heard more about it than any other administration, but this is fact. The next topic I will mention goes to the soldier who put the time and effort into language school, but had been pushed aside with no consideration or respect for the most underrated job in the military. The most underrated soldier in Vietnam and responsible for more right calls in saving human life was the interrogator or the interpreter, whatever you prefer. Speaking the language in dialect or in different dialects was an art. Having the knowledge of telling the truth from an outright lie when interrogating the enemy many times put the United States soldier at an advantage. It is never mentioned or ever given the credit for saving lives. Going into battle knowing our intelligence was correct was the ultimate best investment the military ever made, educating the very few that had the ability to speak this language. To let you know, 1% of the Marine Corps passed the test they gave to go to Vietnamese school. 1%. And they picked the 67 best linguistic backgrounds to be the first ones to ever go through this school and study Vietnamese. We were the first official Vietnam interpreters to set foot in Vietnam in 1966, in September of 66. Waterboarding in the 1960s, in 1960s Vietnam would have been a vacation. No one was taught techniques in getting information. An interrogator improvised as he went along, period. Nothing was out of bounds. Getting information was an art by itself. One lives with the nightmare for the rest of their lives, and this is why doctors at compensation hearings don't know what to make of it. They have never heard its explanation in fact before. It simply was a first. They conveniently brand you with PTSD, think you will take the pills for depression and anger without hope for healing, and no one knows the symptoms of the interpreter simply because in September of 1966, the first official ones were put to the test from the Presidio Monterey Defense Language Institute. Although only receiving a secondary MOS of 99.99, which is an interpreter, along with an 0311, which is a rifleman, as primary MOS, it was the least mentioned advantage for the United States soldier and a very important part of the Vietnam War, with the ability to save lives through speaking through their language and understanding their culture, gaining the trust and getting the confidence of the Vietnamese people. And it's just never mentioned in books. Just never mentioned in books. It's about time it has been. If I told you that their trust happens to belong to a darker skinned person more than a lighter skinned person, would be something never mentioned, and the reason being, they have a darker skin and their faith in you is higher because you look more like them. This has been told to me by hundreds of Vietnamese people. They have a certain comfortability with the way you look. And if you look any different than they do, they have a tendency not to put their faith in you as much. It shocked me when I was told in May. A 19-year-old kid that fought against an unbeatable army and learned how to, in barely 2 months, did just that. Beat the unbeatable in their own backyard. And learning their way of fighting and beat them down badly. Simply put, whether you recognize it or not, the Vietnamese soldier was the best fighting machine on this planet. Thank you.
Hi. My thoughts today, after discussing it to the South for the past several years, this idea of honoring those that made the ultimate sacrifice is certainly there. But before I even start, I'd like to thank everyone on this panel, anyone in uniform, including in the audience that served as a veteran, because you deserve it. The very ability for anyone in this country to benefit from the greatest experiment of a true democracy is from the very beginning of Revolutionary Soldier to today. So we thank you for the opportunity. And to actually to stand up here and make a speech. So the different perspective is things happen. In the past couple of days, something happened that is actually it's quite disturbing. And that is that there was a most recent survey, and that approaching 50% of the young adults, and including school children, have never heard of the Holocaust, nor do they know what the Holocaust is. I mean, I find that absolutely incredible. So it's a matter of education and appreciation. They don't really know what's going on. And there's an old adage, those that do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. And you can see what's going on in this crazy world now. But from a different perspective, aside from honoring those that made the ultimate sacrifice, I believe there is a problem with this country, and that is the returning vet. The returning vet, and I've said this the entire time that we've had the Memorial Day Parade, that this country, it is abysmal of what the Veterans Administration and our elected officials do not take care of the Vietnam veteran, nor they take care of the very quickly disappearing World War II veteran, the Korean veteran, and those, in fact, in any war, including the Middle East. I will use a personal friend. By the way, Ricky Bichelle was 2 years ahead of me. Bobby Di Roberto was a couple of years behind me. We're all in a generation. We're talking to the chorus here. But I address my comments to those looking at LMC-TV. Hopefully they'll do it and maybe make a requirement in schools for the kids not only remember the Holocaust, but remember what the veterans do. Because it's your age that are in high school. These kids go in when they're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they give up the best part of what you are able to enjoy. You go out and go to parties and everything else, but yet then you'll have people go in. The kids coming back now from Iraq, Afghanistan, and incredible non-support for physical and even more mental disabilities. And that what I use not lieutenant, actually he was a full colonel, Joseph Giamatti, grew up in Mamaroneck, went to Mamaroneck High School, graduated, went to University of Tennessee, and like many other people, volunteered and signed up for the Vietnam War. He was in 3 full tours Vietnam. I made a list to make sure. I received the Purple Heart with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, Distinguished Flying Cross, Vietnam Medal, Bronze Star, and the Silver Star. He was also considered for the Congressional Medal of Honor. Not that he was different than any other person that was that day. He did, in fact, as a matter of fact, Joe, when they first had the war, first President Bush in Iraq, he tried to sign up again as a helicopter pilot. They wouldn't let him do it, he was too old. But what happened with Murph was, and we found out unfortunately later, when he got out and he did survive, he had so many nightmares that after the first tour he went back. And we found this out from the doctor. He was diagnosed as one of the worst cases of PSD that they ever saw. He went back for a second tour, he buried the first tour. He went back, he was shot, went to Japan for R&R, came back again, and he buried the second one. And we finally got him to go to get treatment for PTSD. 2 days before he went to get treatment, we unfortunately found out that that brings back, before you go in, all the horror and the nightmares. And unfortunately, he hung himself 2 days before he went in. And this is what's happening. There are thousands and thousands of veterans, whether it be Korean War, Middle East wars, or Vietnam War, are committing suicide. And primarily because of the lack, it was mentioned before, anything I've said before have already been covered. Murph used to tell us that Agent Orange, they used to sit on the 50-gallon barrels and eat lunch. They didn't know what it was. He suffered bleeding from different parts of his body. They didn't know what it was, and it actually turned out to be Agent Orange. But the worst part was he came back. VA did nothing but give him pills. And gave him pills to 3 different times where they had to bring him into the hospital and detoxify him completely. And all they did was do it again. They never treated him. So without going on and on, I'll say and I repeat what I say again, and particularly those that watch this, hopefully the younger generation, write your congressmen, write your elected officials, and demand that the veteran be taken care of in this country. For what they give and they will allow us to do, it is imperative that they do it. And I think it was most apropos that I will read something that's inscribed on the Vietnam veteran wall. If you are able, save them for a place inside of you, and save one backward glance when you are leaving for the places they can no longer go. Be not ashamed to say you love them, though you may or may not have always. Take what they have taught you in their dying and keep it with you as your own. And in that time, when men decide and feel safe to call the war insane, take one moment and embrace those gentle heroes you left behind. Thank you.
Well done. I'm going to speak from my seat. Skip and Dennis were on that panel for the Vietnam Project along with my lifelong friend Greg Mosworth. Ex-mayor, did we call you ex-mayor?
Norman, just call me Norman.
Norma Rosenblum, a great supporter of all veterans, and John Amoruso, Navy Corpsman, have been great new additions to this panel. I believe a corpsman is the most important part of any platoon, and so it is our honor to have him be an important part of this today. Next is Mayor Norman Rosenblum, which everyone knows. He has supported veterans with such commitment and untiring energy, and we consider it an honor to have him be part of this ceremony. For Skip and Dennis, who always have my back, they continue to volunteer their time and service whenever one of these events is scheduled. They have all served their country in one form or another without reservation, because all of them are the real deal. These men have served this country in their own way, and I'm so proud and grateful to call them all friend. My friend. 1968 was the most deadly year of the Vietnam War. But before I start speaking about 1968 and the Tet Offensive, I want to bring you back to the year 1968, a year that transformed America. I got to get you into the mood to understand what you remember of 1968. For me to say let's go back 50 years, I don't think anybody can do it. So I'm going to give you a few details that might jar your memory. We're going to go back 50 years in time to rekindle these memories. Some of you weren't even born. Some were in your teenage years enjoying life like teenagers should. And then there were those that already had already written their honorable legacy in life. Please, let's take a ride down memory lane together and remember our lives as we once lived it. We'll start out in the world of sports.
There you go. Good.
Good boy, Dennis. You're doing good. By the way, that's my baseball mitt. Okay. The Kansas City Athletics moved from Oakland and became the Oakland A's. They had a pitcher called Catfish. Joe DiMaggio became one of the first coaches of the Oakland A's. A lot of people don't know that. Denny McClain became the first 31-game winner since Dizzy Dean. And he did it with the St. Louis Cardinals and the Gas House Gang of 1934. The Detroit Tigers won the World Series, winning 4-3, coming back from 3-1 against the St. Louis Cardinals. And Mickey Lolich was named the MVP. Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers won the Super Bowl II with a 33-14 win over the Oakland Raiders. Bart Starr was named the MVP, and it was the last time Vince Lombardi was ever carried off a football field. Later, in his honor, the Super Bowl winning team was awarded the Vince Lombardi Trophy. O.J. Simpson wins the Heisman Trophy from USC. The Philadelphia 76ers trade Wilt Chamberlain to the Lakers. The Boston Celtics win the NBA championship 4-3, but Jerry West is voted MVP on the losing team. The NBA insignia is that of Jerry West. Now we'll switch over to the events of 1968. Here are a few events to jar your memory. 1968 is called the year that changed the world. The Tet Offensive from January 30th to February 25th becomes the deadliest month of the Vietnam War. Operation Pegasus relieved the Marines at Quezon after 3 months of being under siege. On April 4th, the Reverend Martin Luther King is assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. The nation needed to heal itself as a country and mourn the death of a great inspirational leader. On June 5th, Robert F. Kennedy, brother of slain President John F. Kennedy, is tragically shot down in LA after winning the California presidential primary. Shocked yet again by an assassin's bullet, a country wept in disbelief as Robert Kennedy dies June 6th. June 19th, demonstrators march on D.C. It is called the Poor People's Campaign. On September 30th, Boeing introduced the first 747 jumbo jet. And these next topics, the space program to me is one of distinct. Yeah, I have more admiration for these guys. You can shake a stick at it. October 11th, Apollo 7 is the first mission in U.S. Apollo program. It was to carry a 3-man crew into space. Astronauts Commander Wally Schirra with pilots Don F. Eisel and pilot Walter Cunningham orbited the Earth for 11 days in space. November 5th, National Draft Card Burning Day is started by yuppies. November 5th again, Richard M. Nixon wins the presidency of the United States. December 21st through the 28th, Apollo 8 was the second mission of the Apollo program, carrying astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Andrews. They were the first to orbit the moon and land successfully back on Earth. And on August 1st, much to your delight, McDonald's introduced a Big Mac across the nation for the first time. 1968, the world of music always reminds us where we were when we heard our favorite songs. These are my personal top 10 songs. Your opinion may differ, but music puts us right in that time warp, so we readily smile and laugh about for many years. Here are my top 10. MacArthur Park. I'm not going to read people. You want me to?
Yeah.
Tell you? Okay, MacArthur Park, Richard Harris. Piece of My Heart, Big Brother and the Holding Company. Mrs. Robinson, Simon and Garfunkel. Magic Carpet Ride, Steppenwolf. 6, Reach Out in the Darkness, Friend and Lover. Judy in Disguise, John Fred and his Playboy Band. Midnight Confessions, The Grassroots. People Got to Be Free, The Rascals. Dock of the Bay, Otis Redding. And we have a tie. Just bringing back memories. Have I gotten you to 1968 yet? Okay. What we have is a tie for number 1. Okay, I got Hey Jude with the Beatles, and I've got to get a message to you by the Bee Gees, and my preference is the Bee Gees song. And you won't believe this one. This will make you think, where have all the years gone? The number 1 commercial was, I Like to Buy the World a Coke, which was sung in the meadow with all the different nationalities. Do we remember that?
Yeah.
And what a nice tune it was? Okay, I believe I brought you back to 1968 for the moment. Now it's time to remember 1968 Vietnam and the deadly Tet Offensive. When Americans wince upon hearing presidents make proclamations about foreign policy, the legacy of the Tet Offensive looms large. 50 years ago, on January 30th, 1968, at the start of the sacred Vietnamese holiday of Tet, which celebrated the start of the new lunar year, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong launched a massive military offensive that proved the battle raging in Southeast Asia was far from over, and that President Lyndon Baines Johnson's administration had grossly oversold American progress to the American people. Although the United States troops ultimately ended the offensive successfully and North Vietnamese and Viet Cong suffered brutal losses, these bloody weeks triggered a series of events that continue to undermine America's confidence in their own government. The Tet Offensive came after several months of the North Vietnamese modifying their strategy. Rather than a battle of attrition, the leadership planned to launch a massive assault that was aimed to undermine the morale of the South Vietnamese as well as the American public. Since December of 1967, the North Vietnamese have been conducting a series of attacks meant to send the United States forces in the wrong direction. President Johnson and his military advisors fell head over heels for this trick. The President and General William Westmoreland had focused on potential attacks against the United States Marine base called Quezon. Johnson kept asking military leaders if they were prepared to defend the base, and he kept promising congressional Democrats and Republicans that he has their assurances and that everything would be fine. Meanwhile, Johnson had conducted excuse me, a massive public relations blitz at the end of 1967 to convince the American public that the war was nearing a conclusion and the United States was winning. The Progress Campaign, as it was sometimes called, deployed large volumes of data to convince the media that the communists were losing on the battlefield and that their numbers were diminishing. Westmoreland told Meet the Press on November 19, 1967, that the U.S. could win the war within 2 years, and then proclaimed at the National Press Club on November 21st that the end begins to come into view. In November, of 1967, according to the Harris polls, confidence rose 11 points from 23% to 34%. In his State of his Union address on January 17th, Johnson sounded downright optimistic, even though he acknowledged that the U.S. faced major challenges overseas and that victory in Vietnam would take some time. When he asked Congress to pass, he then asked Congress to pass a tax surcharge to help pay for the escalating costs of the war while continuing to fund the Great Society. The president declared that the enemy was testing the will of the nation to meet the trials that these times impose. Meanwhile, 85,000 new North Vietnamese soldiers were added to their regular army. It's a lot of people, 85,000. In resolute fashion, Johnson went on to promise that America will persevere. Our patience and our perseverance will match our power. Aggression will never prevail. Max Frankel of the New York Times reported, whereas a year ago he promised more cost, more loss, and more agony in the war, this year he emphasized the positive, what he called the marks of progress. And yet the North Vietnamese army grew by 85,000 new troops. Then the situation took a turn a few weeks later, and the crisis as Tet began in the early morning of January 30th was the start of the year of the monkey in Saigon. The when I first saw this, I thought it said NFL. I had to actually look it up because I didn't know what it was. The NLF fighters attacked the American embassy. Saigon had been considered a very safe area. The fighting continued until 9:15 the next morning. 19 enemy soldiers were killed, 5 Americans were killed, 5 major cities, 64 provincial capitals, and over 50 smaller hamlets were attacked as the communists conducted their offensive. Secretary of State Robert McNamara privately told Johnson, "I think it shows 2 things, Mr. President. First, they have more power than some credit them for having. And secondly, they will sustain heavy casualties, but after some time they will remain a substantial force." Then the U.S., we should have just beat them in 1968. After this, it should have been over. Should have never gotten to 1973. Then the United States troops mounted a fierce and effective counterattack, one of the most successful operations of the Vietnam War. When it was over on February 25th, the communists suffered over 40,000 deaths, almost 6,000 captured, which included many of their very skilled soldiers. The fighting ended when the United States and South Vietnamese recaptured the city of Hue. The Tet Offensive showed Johnson and Westmoreland were both lying about having reached an important point in the war where the end begins to come into view, as Westmoreland famously had been quoted. For much of the nation, the specifics of Tet were beside the point. The real story was the context of the disastrous policies in Vietnam that cost thousands of American lives every month. By the winter of 1968, McNamara's prediction that the North Vietnamese army would rally back, remain strong and determined, and the promises that the war was ending were quoted in the press as not true. But to the many, most likely the way too many, it simply was called a lie. Over 40,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong had been killed. Nearly 50,000 when captured and missing are included. Over 1,100 soldiers were killed and over 6,000 wounded in action. The goal was to severely damage the United States and South Vietnamese forces, as well as encourage an uprising against the United States and South Vietnamese governments. 50 years ago, in the year 1968, our veterans engaged in the deadliest year of the Vietnam War. I'll end this part of the Vietnam War with these words. It's not true it's not the critic that counts. It's the man who made it count a supreme possibility. Who wins when the job is finished? who walks away with the pride of a gladiator and the heart of a lion. We may have lost this war in a conference room, but I assure you, there was no contest on the battlefield. These 12th man shirts that we have, I know it's probably a mystery to a lot of these people, but most of you, but we're gonna get to that point right now. At the beginning of October in 2012, I had an idea regarding the Vietnam veterans we had honored on April 25th of that year. My idea was to buy bracelets with the name, rank, branch of service, date of death on the bracelets, to have the Mamaroneck football team wear them 1 week out of every year, so we could keep honoring the 12 from the Mamaroneck Larchmont communities who had given all. Here are the pictures of the 12 Vietnam veterans and their bracelets. You have on your sheet this. This is the list of the 12. I designed this. All right. I'm going to read these names to you, and I'm going to show you their picture, because when you see the picture, and this was the one thing that I thought I had to do, get their picture. When we started this, we started with one person, Dave Porterfield. And then it was told to me that 10 others had been killed, had died or been killed. And then we found out there was one more. So we came out with 12. So I'm gonna read these names off to you. Lieutenant Harold Henry Schock, United States Marine, 30 October 1965. Here's our first casualty. Corporal Edgar Brower Burchell, United States Marine Corps, 4 June 66. Click on to that next one. There, stay there, Dennis. The Burchell family sent me this picture. This is where he was killed. I looked at this picture for a good solid 2.5 hours, 3 hours, looking at this picture saying, I know exactly where this is, but why do I know exactly where this is? I went back into my all the work I had done. I said, I wonder if he was in the 9th Marines. And sure, you know, you do all this work, you don't even realize it. He was in the 9th Marines. This is exactly where I was. I was in this exact spot. I was supposed to be there in May, but I qualified for school, and I didn't get there until August. Tuesday, I received a letter, and I want to read it to you, because I have 50, 60 of these letters that nobody's ever seen and nobody will ever see probably until the day I die. But I'm going to read this one to you because I got this Tuesday. About 5 years ago, I contacted Edgar's twin brother. He has obviously has a twin brother. By phone to speak to him about the work I had done and how his brother is honored in the 12th man tradition in the Mamaroneck Vietnam Memorial. His voice was low key, and he admitted to me that since the death of his brother, the family was so torn apart they hadn't spoken to one another for about 47 years. We spoke, and he was so proud of what had been done for his brother. He cried on the phone. He called me a couple of months later to tell me a miracle had happened. Then he told me that his family was holding a reunion because of this Mamaroneck Vietnam Memorial and 12th man tradition. It was to be the first time in over 45 years they had spoken to each other. And maybe the souls of his family were being pulled together because their brother was so honored. It was the last time I had spoken to him. I just received this letter Tuesday by email. In the letter, these words, well, you can figure it out. Thanks, I need this. I wanted to know that my sister Dawn and I discovered that Edgar, Ricky Brower, Burchell's twin brother, Richard Carroll Burchell, passed away on December 10th, 2017. I'm sending you his obituary. My sister and I had spoken to and shared a few emails with him these last years because of you. We are so grateful. Both of the twins, Ricky and Dick, were friends of ours, and we were teenagers, and our parents were also very fond of them. Dick had a very difficult life, but there was some closure for him because of what you created with the 12th man tradition. You have blessed so many. Thank you, Barbara Lupino. That was mailed to me Tuesday. Excuse me if I got emotional. Okay, I'm going to continue on with the names. Hospital, and this is where it all started. This is my best friend here. The hospitalman David Edward Porterfield, USN/USMC, 18 July 66, and there was an outstanding story at the end of this about David. Corporal Robert DiRoberto, United States Marine Corps, 15 December 66. Staff Sergeant Richard Allen Western, a very close friend of mine too, U.S. Army, 20 May 1968. Major Daniel James Keating Jr., United States Marine Corps, 22 May 68. Major Daniel Keating was a father of 5 children. His sister graduated the year after I did, and I knew her very well and never put one with the other. I didn't know this till later. Lance Corporal Ernest James Hill, United States Marine Corps, 14 July 868. PFC Vito Vitro, United States Army, 28 February 69. Let me tell you, this kid joined the Army, and his parents went back to Italy. He hadn't been in this country long. He joined the Army, and his parents were against him joining the service. He went to Vietnam and lasted less than 30 days. Out of these 12 guys, I believe 4 have lasted less than 33 days in Vietnam. They shipped his body back to Mamaroneck, where his parents shipped his body back to Italy, San Vito, which is where my family is from, and they named the street after him. And the kids of Mamaroneck High School got this information. This is one of the 3 that the Mamaroneck High School kids helped me. I thought this, and they gave me his obituary in Italian, which I actually have in the 12th Man showcase. Okay, we're going to go on. PFC Anthony Philip Agar, United States Army, 7 May 69. Spec 4 John Batterson Jr., who graduated with me, United States Army, 19 June 69. Second Lieutenant Martin Jerome Keogh, U.S. Army, 2 March 1970. Another person I didn't know I knew. I caddied with him in 1960 in Wingfoot. I knew the name somewhere, but I couldn't put 1 and 1 together.
Yeah.
And somebody told me, well, he caddied with you in 1960. And AIG Daniel Morton Brown, United States Air Force, 4 June 1971. Look at this next picture. This picture, and I'm sorry for the sunlight there, but things happen. When I saw this picture, I thought it was a great picture of David. But what I didn't know, this is by its peers, the greatest football team that ever played at Mamaroneck High School. This picture of David is on the left-hand side. Now in the middle is Jerry Warrington. He just died of cancer about 3 years ago. And I didn't even know this, but on the right-hand side of this picture is Richard Western. This picture was taken, I call it a 1 in a billion. All right, I wonder if this was at the beginning of the sports section of the 1964 Mohegan. I wonder if the guy who took this picture ever knew what he had taken. This was phenomenal. Okay, let's see if I can actually find my place here. Coach Vitti liked the idea, but we had to give it a name. I was concerned of Texas A&M's tradition of the 12th man, but that was targeted at their audience in the football games. Between us, the decision was made to finalize the name, the 12th man, and so it was ready to go. I had designed a shirt, but it was lacking something. Maybe the obvious. The number 12 somehow needed to be highlighted out. Coach Vitti, who must also be good in graphics because I'm not, suggested making the 12 big. And when I saw it, I said, this is it, perfect. After looking at it, I knew we had something very special. So on October 8th of 2012, I introduced the 12th man tradition and took off from there. I went on Facebook, had a website made combined with my email addresses, and told my friends of the idea, and if interested, send me the money for the cost of the shirt, and you'll receive it in 2 to 3 weeks. I could not believe the outpouring of love with so many checks to hit my mailbox. And so the 12th man was set to be nationwide. We had 2 large turnouts for the buying of these shirts. There's over 500 of these shirts sold across this country. And these shirts are in Vietnam also. And I'll get that one in a second. You have a copy of the 12th man tradition in front of you. When you get a chance, that's the other piece of paper. That'll explain the whole tradition a lot better than probably how I explained it. It was meant for the Portchester Mamaroneck game, but after a couple of years, schedule changed, and Portchester was hit or missed to play Mamaroneck at all. Right, John? You never thought this would ever. You never thought this rivalry would ever stop. Coach Vitti did an outstanding job of keeping this tradition alive to this day. And once a year, a player of on the Mamaroneck High School football team has won this award for always giving 100%, 110% on the field and maintaining a good academic profile. Surely his efforts have been special in keeping these players proud of the fact that they have won an award so special in life. He also brings the Mamaroneck football team to the memorial showcases and speaks of the sacrifices of the 12 and all Vietnam veterans. Between Coach Anthony Vitti and Coach Mike Schiaparelli, or as Shap as we all know him, the 12th man tradition remains strong in thought and precious in wisdom. Every year, one football player calls me up to thank me for this tradition and my service to America. I can tell you, nothing in this world has meant more to me than the success of the 12th man tradition. It now is 7 years old. The 2016 winner of the 12th Man Award was Joey Spano. He also received a $2,500 scholarship that we raised at Molly Spillane's and through my requests. The 2017 winner was Emerson Genovese, and the 2018 winner is Sam Giroux. I was hoping he would be here, but he's not, and I bought him a shirt, 12th man shirt, and it just so happens that his mother, Sandra, was my photographer for the Mamaroneck Vietnam Memorial Ceremony, and I bought her a shirt too. So I was hoping they'd come, but I guess they couldn't make it, but that's okay. I want to thank Coach Vitti, Coach Schiaparelli, and all the coaches. Keith Yeiser too, who's back in the back, being real silent back there. Has done a lot for the Mamaroneck football team and their continuous admiration and respect for the 12th man. Over 500 shirts have been purchased from coast to coast, border to border, and even back to Vietnam. This tradition has done so much for the families of the 12. I couldn't imagine the years of pain they must have endured, but their support for the 12th man and the Vietnam Memorial showcases have been something to marvel at. Freedom is not free, and it will remain the single greatest achievement of mankind. This is the last topic I'm going to speak on. This just happened this year. Thanks for bearing with me. I don't know.
I had no choice, it's all right.
For once you had that done, huh?
They locked the door after we were okay.
I was asked to go on a 9-day tour of Vietnam by the Greatest Generations Foundation on February 22nd of this year. Okay, Jim Hackett my friend Jim Hackett of Larchmont, who now lives in California, invited me, but I declined to go back. 15 Marines were picked to go on a tour, and they did an outstanding job of taking pictures and presenting the information of where they were. as to go back in time if one readily wanted to. I didn't. That is Corpsman Paul Buzz Baviello, who wrote this book, Corpsman Up. Who lives in California, saluting and wearing the 12th man shirt. Who would have figured? Then there are 4 Marines wearing the 12th man shirt by Hill 55 in Da Nang, where many casualties were suffered at the hands of the North Vietnamese Army. This is the very first hill that I reported to. And then from there I went 8 miles out, and then from there I went 13 miles out. The group of 15 formed a circle on Hill 55, and Jim Hackett conducted the honor of a roll call of the names of the 12 Vietnam vets from the Mamaroneck Larchmont communities. The last picture is the exact site. Excuse me. The last picture is the exact site where Doc David Edward Porterfield, my best friend, took his last breath saving the lives of Marines. Without regard to the serious wounds that he has sustained until he succumbed to those very wounds. I've been searching for a closure to the work I've done, but somehow it eluded me until I saw this picture. All this happened because Dave meant that much to me, but I couldn't give him the proper respect or farewell because I myself was in language school and soon to serve in Vietnam. To think that this shirt and the 12th man have made it all the way back to Vietnam has been an incredible journey. I guess sort of a miracle, you might say. To my 12 friends who I feel I've known all my life, the journey from the forgotten to the remembered has been a humbling experience. This picture of Dave's final resting place in Vietnam hopefully will be the last picture entered in the 12th man tradition in the Mamaroneck Vietnam Memorial showcases. Sometimes the melody of a song is so beautiful the words are lost. You've heard the song Danny Boy a million times, but somehow the meaning of the song is not as clear to those as one would like. It is about a father who has lost 2 sons to war, only to have the 3rd son ready to engage to fight for country, yet once again, and the hardships his father had to endure during the time. The melody is beautiful. The meaning is less understood. To the families, friends, and brotherhood of these veterans, America honors their dedication and service. I honor their sacrifice and all the help the families have shared with me to make this happen. As I spoke about Danny Boy with such feeling, I'm going to ask you now to remain in your seats and listen to the words to this closing ceremony. Please take the time to listen, remain seated, and you will learn more about the Vietnam veterans returning home than you can ever imagine. On the tables, there are things that we are associated with us that we would like to see, have you look at. I want to thank you all again for being so patient and taking the time to understand this Vietnam War. There will be a short Q&A in a few minutes. We'll give you a chance to walk around and see the pictures. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you.
Well, the floor is open. Anybody can feel free to circulate, to look at the things, if anybody has any questions. So I've asked a million questions, but...
It's a pretty long presentation. If you have any questions, don't ask me.
I have a question. So with all the movies and everything, which one would you say is the most?
Be specific who you want to ask us to.
Well, everybody, because you might all, well, or I guess, just
Right.
like, we know Platoon, and we know, I think there was one over there that I saw, Born on the 4th of July. Which one would you, Sal, think of?
I've never seen a movie of Vietnam.
You haven't?
No, this is the only one I've ever seen. I didn't even know it was about Vietnam.
'Cause you
Well, I've
just-
never
you just-
seen any movie.
You don't want to see it.
No, there's not anything they can put on a TV tube that could tell me anything. So I'm sure that these guys do.
Well,
Yes.
our local.
There's an ultimate irony about Vietnam. While the United States has gone through several wars, the Vietnam War is separate from all other wars that engage in the U.S. military. The ultimate irony is that During World War II, Ho Chi Minh was probably one of the best supporters and closest allies for the United States during World War II. It was only because it became a political situation where Vietnam used to be part of French Indochina, which is Laos, Cambodia, and so on. And it's because the French were being beat up and gotten out and had nothing to do with the United States. And keep in mind, Ho Chi Minh was a close ally, that John Foster Dulles at the time, and politics sucked the United States into war, and we never should have been there. And the sad part is that, as mentioned before, that those in uniform were the messengers, not those that created it. And I can tell you that, and again, this is a good message to those in the millennial and the new younger generation. Where now you go on Facebook and television and you see veterans coming back and people stop them in the airport and cheer. I can tell you sitting in Cooks where people walked in with the uniform and people would degrade them and they would spit at them and everything else. And I think it's about time, aside from what I mentioned before about taking care of the vets in the VA hospital, that it is, and only you guys can answer this, but it's about time that those in uniform that served in World War II were appreciated and take that psychological damage away, and that people really do appreciate you for giving up in the services they did. So again, thank you guys.
You guys have a favorite movie?
I never really watched anything really. Yeah, I'm knowing so many guys that served in country over there and listened to what they had to say. You know, I mean, most of my movies were submarine movies I watched.
I just want to maybe I'm the only former Vietnamese citizen here in Amoruso.
Speak a little louder, I'm sorry.
I'm a little bit newer here. I'm only here in 3 years,
Okay.
but I came here in '68, and I was surprised about the whole thing that happened with all the soldiers here, how they were badly treated, and I'm sorry for all the family. I just knew about this only a few days ago when I came to the library. I'm sorry for everybody.
Thank you.
Well, we're glad you came. Thank you for coming. John?
Couple things. Our father's generation, they came back from the big war and didn't talk about the war. And I appreciate you guys talking about it, number one. And you sort of get an appreciation of what you guys went through. And, thank you. Number two, I save stuff down. As historian, whatever you have, Sal, I want. Right, so don't let it get away, because there's too much history, and what you have is history that gets away and gets thrown in the garbage. And that needs to be saved. Letters, everything.
Thanks. John, the reason why, and John's father coached me. We go back, his family and I we were pretty close knit. The reason people don't talk about war is because there's nobody, you can't describe it. I actually, when I first met Lori, I tried to give an idea of exactly that feeling. So put yourself against the wall right here, and a black widow spider right next to your ear. And you make one move and that black widow spider bites you. And you sit there and you can't even breathe. The reason people don't talk about it is because they cannot relive that experience and make you understand exactly what happened. It's a virtual impossibility. For us to tell you anything that happened would, I know, just go in one ear and out the other, because you gotta feel the emotion that is involved at the moment, and that can't be brought out. So in most cases, they don't talk about it. I thought when we did the Vietnam project in Rhinebeck, and I had two of these guys with me, when the 11th graders asked us these questions, it was kind of funny, because one kid, I remember one kid going, he gave us a question, and I said, who asked you, who told you to ask a question like that? He said his grandfather. And I went, he said, your grandfather. And it was funny because their questions, you could tell, were coming from their parents or grandparents. Because they weren't really privy on Vietnam. They didn't know what was going on. But it was a phenomenal 3 years that we did. And we all enjoyed it so much. And I think what it did is it healed us as much as anything. You know, it captured their emotion, but it healed us to be able to talk about it for a change. You know, we keep it within ourselves, and most of our conversation's angry. You know, we're mad at it. You know, I've got to sit here and talk about Dave Porterfield. A kid's 19 years old, and he, you know, you hear these stories. It ticks you off. It ticks you off. What I wrote on this Tet Offensive is one part of Vietnam. It's the whole war that shouldn't have even happened. And it did. And what can you do? It's now part of history. You know, yeah.
Hi.
Can I say one
I'm
real quick
Susan
thing?
Reynolds.
To your point that you just raised is very important. In World War II, at the end, when I went into the camps, Eisenhower instructed specifically to take pictures, and it's part of history. And his point is being proven right now because people are trying to rewrite history saying it never happened. So you're 100% right. Again, if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it. So your point is excellent.
You need to save the stuff, man. It needs to be saved.
And good job.
I'm Susan Riley, I'm the library director here, and I wanted to thank you for this presentation. I think that it was really tremendous. So thank you very much. I do have a question for you. I think that it's terrific that you're passing on this information to the kids at the high schools by using the bracelets and all that. But I was wondering why you chose the football team, and also have you considered expanding this to maybe some of the women's teams or something, the girls' teams, to educate further and not just have it isolated to the males?
Well, the reason it's isolated is because I put the person to the sport. To have it grow would be my wildest dreams, to be very honest with you. I think it would be great. The closure that I have with the picture of David, it's been 7 years I've been doing this, 6, 7 years. And I'm going to tell you the truth, I'm really tired. If it wants to be picked up by Mamaroneck High School, they're going to have to make the effort to call me, even if it's picked up by Rhinebeck, or any of the other schools, or any other things. I would be the first one to go right back into it and try and help them establish it. Yeah, I think that is a phenomenal idea. Yeah, Keith?
Good afternoon. First and foremost, Sal, thank you very much. And since its origin, I've watched your presentations and with your panel and everything else. To answer Susan's question in regard to this, Susan, Mamaroneck, this is just from a historical standpoint. Mamaroneck-Portchester is the third oldest rivalry in Westchester County football. And at one time it was larger than life in this township. And what Sal went through, and as he kind of alluded to earlier in his presentation regarding the '63 football team being one of the greatest historically in 1968, that football team also was very good. And they went 7-1. Sal, we're not going to say that because there was no debate because the quarterback was present in the room. But Susan, going back to that, from that standpoint, just from that standpoint, the 12th man, there's more to it as to Sal. I'm not saying that he left anything out of it, but in regards to that, David Porterfield was the defensive end linebacker on a great. So that's the closeness to it. Also, from the other standpoint, in looking at it, it's just so old. It goes back to the 1800s when the Central School was playing football, and the WIA, which was started in 1906, Mamaroneck was one of the original schools. So it doesn't omit in terms of female sports, because remember, Title IX didn't come around until 1972. So that 12th man tradition, and being at Mamaroneck plays Portchester, the whole school, the town used to shut down. So just saying that, all right? But thank you, sir.
Thank you. I will tell you, it's the one fact that I'm more disturbed with than anything is this tradition, as rich as it's been for 7 years, and like I said, it's from border to border, coast to coast, and now back in Vietnam, it's still not recognized by Mamaroneck High School. And they don't give me the explanation why. I've asked them numerous times to make it a tradition. And it sounds like, you gotta pull teeth out of their mouth to get this done. Well, go ahead, Keith, go ahead. You tell me.
In all fairness, I'm gonna stay seated. In all fairness, it started with Mamaroneck, Portchester. Am I right? As being a game.
Well, the original thing was.
Yes, because
the 1 week.
Mamaroneck used to play Portchester.
The 1 week was so special.
And coinciding with that. But I really believe that in terms of it being a permanent display at the high school, from one end, you can't burn a candle bright, and then on the other end, you want to blow the candle out. It's being displayed. I also believe that it should be displayed at Rhinebeck because Burchell, I won the Burchell Award.
It is displayed at Rhinebeck.
Okay, but I'm just saying from the standpoint
Of
that
Ward
when
12.
I won the Burchell, I didn't even know Rich Burchell when I won the award in 1972.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
In 1972, I won that award. So, as it's being expounded upon, I say, let that candle blow real high, but don't extinguish it from that standpoint. Why Mamaroneck is not pushing it, it may or may not be anything. Just like when we say Mamaroneck Veterans Memorial Field. Do we say anything about the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the World War I, Korean, okay? I give you credit for just bringing this into light because the Vietnam veteran, believe it or not, was a forgotten veteran. So it should be expounded upon. And it's even more now with being 50 years. So, I mean, just give it a little bit more time and hopefully that it can be just broadened.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Can I
Keith.
interrupt for 1 minute for anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about the Vietnam period? On Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we are going to be showing the wonderful presentation that Tom Hanks and CNN did about the 1960s. The piece that will be showing as part of, we're showing 3 pieces of it at a time. PBS gave us the right to do that. The piece we are showing on Tuesday is the piece about Vietnam and also the British invasion. So if anybody's interested in coming and learning a little bit more about Vietnam, and additionally in our book group discussion that we are doing on Wednesday, there'll be plenty there. So anybody who's interested, come on in, it's free, so.
A statement and a question. We were fortunate enough to be in Washington, D.C. last week at the Cherry Blossom Festival. We also visited the Vietnam Memorial Wall. And it's the second time we've been there, and it's unbelievable. It should be on everybody's list. But there was something else to go back to what Susan Riley said. There was a statue, a bronze statue. It showed 1 or 2 wounded servicemen. They were carrying Vietnam era weapons. And there are 2 nurses there taking care of them. It was the most moving thing I've seen. So to carry the 12 men on, we need some women in the community or somewhere maybe watching to, perhaps expand it to to the women who've served this country.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm all for one for, you know, digging up this knowledge.
I'm not taking anything away from
But
you guys.
this 12th man is really, it's specified.
Yeah.
It's specified. You know, Kemper has theirs, and Vietnam has theirs, and it's just an individual thing. But you know, as far as the women are concerned, it's really sad that it's not as recognized as it should be. And I'll tell you something else. I'll tell you the most stressing job of all the jobs in Vietnam. All right, imagine being a body packer. I have a friend of mine that did this. Packed bodies. It was Anthony's Coach Fitty's father, Tony. He did this. The Red Cross. My family knows. My family knows what it feels like to have a person walk up to this front door in a uniform and not know at that moment. And I can tell you, my grandmother did not know and didn't speak English. Did not know if I was alive or dead. But it automatically, if it wasn't for the next door neighbor being able to interpret in Italian that I was okay. You imagine what she felt like at the beginning of that walk to the time he knocked on the door. You know, I gotta be scared. I asked my mother for 50 years what went on through her mind. When she found out I was wounded, never asked me. Never answered that question once in my life. Until 2 years before she passed away at the nursing home, I was helping somebody else eat. Guys on shoot. And as I was putting food in her mouth, my mother said, I prayed. And I looked at her and I said, what? She said, I prayed. I said, what are you talking about? She goes, you asked me what I thought about when I found out you got wounded. And it's exactly what I thought. I prayed. I couldn't believe she answered the question 2 years, you know, after all these years. I said, what made you just say that? And she said it was about time. It was the right time to say it. And I finally got closure on that, but I can't imagine, you know, I'm only talking about being wounded. I can't imagine having somebody, and Keith will understand this a little bit better than most of you. When Dennis and I went back to argue whether this was a memorial or a tribute, we were going to call it a memorial anyway you looked at it. All right, but we had to get a certain approval from Mamaroneck High School, and so we just said, what do you want to call it? And they said tribute, fine, done, finished. All right, put whatever you want up. We'll call it a memorial. You can call it anything you want. But as I walked by into that conference room, I went by the office of the junior high school where Mrs. Porterfield worked for 30 some odd years. And I said to myself, and it was the biggest visualization I've ever had, I said, I can imagine her working in that office and having a soldier walk in to tell her that her son was just killed. And it was alarming to me to say, and I don't even know what triggered it off, except that I knew that was the office that she was working in. I mean, imagine just, you know, waking up one morning and going to work and then finding this out. It's pretty awful. Yeah, Keith?
And I've been to maybe 3 or 4 1968 kind of celebrations or commemorations, and it just seems that each one that I hear as is being presented, and this one likewise, why was the 1968 Democratic National Convention omitted in your presentation?
It wasn't, Keith. I tell you what, I was gonna put that in. I was gonna put it. It was just
because it was so anti-Vietnam.
Yeah.
That I thought it might have been a slap to that's my thought. I'm not saying it's the way you intended it to be.
It was. I had it in originally. I'll be very honest with you. And when I told you I admitted to 70 pages, that was part of it. I said I just couldn't keep it. You know, I had to keep it down to a minimum because it's easy to lose. And I'm sure that people in this room did probably lose attention to what I was saying. It's not. But I agree with you. The Democratic Convention in Chicago.
The whole world's watching.
Yeah.
Peace signs, everything that kind of really expounded this whole movement of anti-Vietnam, but it was just omitted. And it's not just you. I've been to other 1968 presentations. Just somehow it's not mentioned.
CIA
We are
three.
gonna discuss it at the book presentation,
I'll be there.
big time on Wednesday.
You know, Keith, the interesting
With
part is,
pictures.
especially what's going on today in this country with the different things. So if you remember, at Kent State, it's the college kids that really changed the direction of the Vietnam War. It was after Kent State and the demonstrations beyond the Democratic Convention that Johnson immediately came out after and said, one, I'm not running for president again. And all of a sudden, the popular support for Vietnam disappeared altogether, and that's when you drew it out. So the bottom line is, the power in this country does remain with the people. If they only wake up and vote once in a while and get involved, then you can get a country in the right direction.
Bravo.
Eleanor.
Good, Ellen.
Hi, I'm Eleanor, and I just wanted to thank all of you, and just wanted to let everybody know it was terrifying for me. I had 3 brothers rotating in Vietnam with all you guys, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
And Sal, we have 5 boys in our family too, you know that, right?
Yeah.
5 boys, we all served United States Army,
Yeah,
with different
it's just-
wars.
No, we,
And my next door neighbor, Frank Roman, was killed in World War II.
it's, you'd like to be able to get it all. You'd like to be able to capture it all. You know, we're, there's nothing better in the world than waking up and just waking up and just saying you're free. Basically, politicians make laws and veterans enforce them.
It's talking to that point, you know, you gotta shut me up, but what we talked about before is, before we even started this, there's a gentleman sitting right to my left that, because of World War II and the Sullivan Law, the Sullivan Act, or the policy, is that because there were 5 brothers in the Navy, that brothers don't, but yet, I want you to repeat the story you told me with you and
My
your brother,
brother, well,
and the dedication.
there were 31 sets of brothers in Vietnam that actually were killed. 31 brothers got killed in Vietnam. People don't even. Okay, I was there in January of '69. My brother got there in April. So I get a letter from Congressman saying, you know, your brother's here. You could go. We can transfer you out. So I said, tell my brother to go home because he just got here. So my brother said he didn't want. So we had to sign papers, and we both stayed there, which my mother was very upset about. Fortunately, we both came back. You know, he was down south on swift boats, and I was up in the DMZ. But we both came back, and you know what I don't know how Sal felt, but my idea when I went over there was, listen, I may not come back, but I'm not going to worry about it. I never went on R&R because I didn't want to leave the country because I saw too many guys leave, go away for 5 or 7 days where they gave me R&R and then come back and they were like, you know, la daydreaming, thinking about what they did, and they lose focus. And to me, it was the kind of place like you're there. And when I leave, I don't want to come back. I want to just leave. I mean, I have some stats here. Let me just 39,996 guys who killed there were 22 years or younger. Never got to live their lives, these guys. 12 of them were 17 years old, 5 were 16, and 1 guy was even 15 years old. 997 were killed the first day they got there. 1,448, even worse, were killed on their last day in Vietnam, which you can talk to Sal. When you get to be a short timer, it's kind of scary because if you got 10 days, what they say, got 10 days and wake up, well, then you really get like, I only got 10 days left, I want to get at it. But there was 1,400 guys never, it was one school in Philadelphia, 54 guys from that school were killed. Thomas Edison High School in Philly. Wow. From one high school. There were 8 women who were nurses there who, you know, the nurses were in the rear, but they got rocket attacks, they got mortar rounds, and it's just, you know, when you look at those stats and you see that 39,996 were 22 or younger.
There, in World War II, the average, I'll break this down for you. In World War II, the average combat soldier served 44 days out of a year in combat. The Vietnam soldier served 204 days. That's huge. That's 5 times different. you know, fortunately, for World War II veterans, which I had the highest praise for. We're all here because of World War II veterans. They are the greatest generation without a question. And we had to, when we did a lot of this work, we had to break it down to the Vietnam veteran. We just wanted to keep it separate. We know the praise that we need to give with the World War II veterans and that generation, but we just wanted to get this thing singled out. And that might answer the specific part of why I just went for football. You know, I could have gone for swimming, I could have gone for baseball too. It just really fell into place. And I cherish it so much as it stands where it is, that it's a good idea that won't be a bad idea to expand it. But I think just keeping it right in that pocket, it would be the best way to keep it. I don't know. That would be that's under, Keith knows it better than I do. That's under school policy anyway. I don't know what leeway they give. They make their own rules. You know, we're the last ones to know about it.
I just thought it would be helpful to share the information. With
I would love to tell the whole school. I'd love to have Mamaroneck High School just go out there and make one day out of a whole. I mean, they take snow days out when 3 flakes fall. So why don't you just make one day where the school goes in front of that tribute they want to call it or whatever, and you know, explain the story to these kids. You know, and it's a pretty easy thing, right? But you'd be surprised at how many people don't know what. Am I right, Keith? How many kids don't really know about this?
I agree with you, but on a partial basis, because I still think that it should be something, whether it's done on Veterans Day, because of the ultimate sacrifice of veterans. It could be done on Memorial Day, which was designated in our history to say we will now commemorate the wars. But to have a special day for the 12th man, I'm not.
No, I didn't say special day.
No, I'm just saying, but in terms, but where I can agree with you, and I just think that this goes all in all, there should be something that should be incorporated in terms of history about Mamaroneck, about Rhinebeck, in the curriculum. I mean, so much so
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
We work on mandates. That's not a mandate, so it wouldn't be. So there's a lot of things that goes in my mind regarding Mamaroneck that should be incorporated in history, and that would be a great part of it in terms of the 12 individual men who sacrificed.
And going back to what Ms. Riley said, I'm a computer nerd, so I don't know how to address
I
these
can
things.
tell from the presentation.
Wait a minute. Turn the song back on.
I hope that there's somewhere some type of database that can tell us, especially in Mamaroneck, how many women from Mamaroneck served in the Vietnam War. That would
Well,
make
if
me
you go up to,
extremely.
if you go up to the park, Langston Park in Somers, their names are on there.
Where?
Really?
Langston Park in Somers, there's 100, I think it's 113, 116 Westchester County veterans. And their names are all, we read them every year. We go up there and we read each section. Yeah, LADS.
I would like to go with you, just out of curiosity, from the people from Mamaroneck, because we just recently, because they tried to re-commemorate Memorial Field, and one of our board of education trustees was asking, well, what about the Korean War? How many were killed in the Korean War? That just wasn't, because we have Kemper, we have Memorial Park right here on Prospect, but when I was a kid, every Memorial Day when we marched in the Memorial Day parade, we could, right there was a World War II monument, or to all the veterans, not just the guys who got killed, but all the veterans in the back. I asked John, I said, where is that picture? Where is that memorial that was right here in the back of the police station? Because it had all the names of every individual that had participated in the conflict.
Well, the one up in Somers has the Korean also. But the Vietnam veterans built this whole walkway and the whole thing up there.
Yes.
And then there's a monument for every war the United States fought in.
If you don't
all
mind,
the
the
way
next
up to
time you
Tet.
go, I'd like to be part of that.
And at the top, we have the Vietnam one, and then we have the Korean one right just below it.
Okay.
And then coming down the path is all the
I'll
other.
talk to you after that. I just
Okay,
wanted
the
to-
Korean and the Vietnam one, every name is on there, and we read it every Memorial Day.
And
we
they say
read
from
every-
Westchester County or the township?
Westchester County,
Okay.
all Westchester County, anybody from Westchester County.
Mario?
Well, I'm going to tell you, there is a lady on the Kemper Memorial. Her name is Kathleen Cullen from Larchmont. She got killed World War II. Was a lady.
Was she a nurse?
Yes, something to do with the medical field, right?
Is she on the wall?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
absolutely. Kathleen Cullen from Larchmont.
I have a comment, if I may.
This
Just
is
to
last
show
because
you-
I have to excuse myself by saying,
Real
Time's
quick,
up.
real quick, just to show you, things do come full circle. Growing up as a child, not only did we pray in school, we sang the national anthem. My children, my grandchildren, do not know the words to the national anthem. It is not sung at the beginning of school programs. Yes, they have a orchestra, they have a horn. Nobody knows the words to the national anthem.
Pretty sad, isn't
It
it?
is sad.
That's
Yes.
the attitude of the school
Yes.
board.
Oh, yeah.
I think we do under Mamaroneck.
I've been there. I asked the superintendent when I was there, I worked in government. I was at a ceremony and I asked the superintendent, why don't we sing? No answer. So they are not as supportive as you think.
You're talking about Robert Shaps?
Yes.
Okay.
I think all school districts
Thank you
should
very
do the same.
much. I really enjoyed it.
I dealt with Ryan Neck.
Thank you.
Same thing.